I'm Phil Hellmuth Jr. We've all heard someone say how their fate changed on the turn of a card. Let me tell you something. That's happened to me lots of times. One card here, one card there. Maybe I don't have as many championships. Maybe I have more. Well, in poker, the fate of your hand often changes with the turn card. In this lesson, we'll look at some strategies that will help you survive or thrive when you're facing the turn. Now, the key to playing the turn is to understand when you want to shut down any further betting and when you're okay with leaving the betting open. Closing the action simply means that your opponent can't bet again on that round. For example, if your opponent checks to you and you check behind, you've closed the action on the turn and you're going to see the river card. If, on the other hand, your opponent checks to you and you bet out, you're leaving the action open and giving your opponent a chance to call or raise you. Likewise, if your opponent bets the turn and you call, you're closing the action. But if your opponent bets and you raise, you're leaving the action open and giving your opponent an opportunity to 3-bet against you or maybe move all in. He might put some heat on you, baby. The reason this is important is because there are many times you may have the best hand on the turn, but it's not strong enough to withstand a raise or a re-raise from your opponent. This is often true when you're holding something like top pair, which can be especially vulnerable. If you only have one pair on the turn, opening up the action to your opponent is dangerous because if you get check raised, you're most likely going to have to fold and you may well be folding the best hand. Well, let's look at an example. Let's say you have King Jack on a board of King 9 4 7. If your opponent checks to you, checking back isn't bad because the board isn't dangerous, and giving your opponent a free card isn't likely to hurt your hand. In other words, it's unlikely as a straight draw, there's no flush draws out there. Betting here, however, can cause you trouble. If you have your opponent beat, they are probably intending to do one of two things after you bet: fold or check raise. If your opponent folds and your bet earns you nothing, of course you do win the pot, but you don't make any more money from the hand. And if they check raise, then your bet lost you the entire pot because you're probably going to have to fold King Jack, which is an even worse outcome. If you're up against a better hand than yours, betting isn't good either. If you check, you lose absolutely no money on the turn, but if you bet, you lose the amount that you bet in addition to whatever money was already in the pot. While betting marginal hands can be costly on the turn, raising with them can be profitable because when you raise in the turn, you put a lot of pressure on your opponent. You might raise, for example, with the King 9 7 4 board with 9s with the 10 and force your opponent to throw away the King Jack. Take that! Yeah, you're going to make me fold King Jack. I'm going to make you fold King Jack. You can raise by either check raising when you're out of position or by just raising when you're in position. Either way, it's a very strong play because it makes it very hard for your opponent to call, even if he's holding a hand like King Queen. So remember, while raising on the flop often signals weakness, raising on the turn often signals real strength, which is why it's a more effective play. So basically, when it comes to leaving the action open or closed on the turn, you really have to kind of pay attention to what your opponent's been doing all day, his tendencies. Is it the kind of player, do you know he's weak? Do you actually want him to check raise when you have King Jack on the King 9 7 4 board? More often than not, you probably don't because, so closing the action is a very smart move when you have a marginal hand on the turn.